Picture a bustling medieval city alive with the sounds of merchants haggling, children laughing, and church bells ringing. The streets are packed with traders selling spices from distant lands, craftsmen shaping metal into tools, and farmers bringing fresh produce to market. The air smells of baking bread and salt from the nearby sea. This was a place of wealth, culture, and life until the waters came without warning. One fateful day, the sky darkened, the wind howled, and the sea rose like a beast awakened. Waves taller than the city's tallest towers crashed over its walls, swallowing homes, streets, and lives in moments. The thriving heart of trade and faith was silenced beneath the waves, lost to time. For centuries, the mystery of this sunken city has haunted historians and treasure hunters alike. What caused the flood? Were there survivors? And why did this once great settlement vanish from memory? Today, we dive into the depths of history to uncover the truth behind the catastrophe that buried a medieval marvel and the clues that may finally reveal its secrets. Stay with us, because what we've discovered will change how you see the power of nature and the fragility of human civilization. But before we dive into the hard evidence, let's step into the world of whispers and wonder. The legends that kept this lost city alive in memory long after the waves claimed it. For generations, fishermen along this coast told stories of ghostly towers glimpsed beneath the water on calm days, of bells ringing from the depths when storms approached. These tales weren't just campfire scares, they were echoes of a real catastrophe, passed down like a family heirloom. Medieval chronicles written by monks and scribes who may have known survivors describe a city swallowed by God's wrath in vivid detail. One account speaks of a wealthy port so proud that its citizens mocked the sea itself until the sea answered back. Another claims the flood was punishment for a cursed treasure hidden within the city walls. What's fascinating is how these stories blend fact with fantasy. The same documents that exaggerate with tales of sea monsters also record precise details, like the exact date of the disaster, that later matched archaeological findings. Even today, locals warn children not to swim near certain coves, saying the drowned city's ghosts might pull them under. But these myths aren't just superstition, they're a puzzle. Every embellished story holds a kernel of truth, like breadcrumbs leading us back to what really happened that terrible day. And as we'll soon see, science is finally catching up to the legends. Now let's pull back the waters of time and step into the bustling streets of this once thriving city. Picture a place alive with the clamor of merchants haggling over spices and silks, the scent of fresh baked bread mingling with salt air, and grand stone buildings towering over narrow, winding lanes. This wasn't just any settlement, it was a beating heart of trade where ships from distant lands docked to unload treasures like amber, wine, and finely crafted weapons. The city's wealth was written in its architecture. Imagine sturdy timber-framed houses with steeply pitched roofs to shed heavy rains, their upper floors jutting out over the streets below. At the center stood a massive guild hall where merchants sealed deals over cups of spiced wine, and a towering church whose bells could be heard for miles. The docks were a forest of masts, with sailors unloading cargo from as far away as the Mediterranean and the Baltic. But it wasn't just goods that flowed through these streets, ideas did too. Scholars and artists gathered in candlelit taverns, debating philosophy while minstrels sang tales of far-off kingdoms. The city's markets buzzed with a dozen languages, and its workshops produced everything from intricate jewelry to the finest woolen cloth in the region. Yet beneath this prosperity lay sharp divides. The wealthy patricians lived in stone mansions with glass windows, a luxury few could afford, while laborers crowded into cramped quarters near the docks. The flood didn't just erase buildings, it wiped away a whole world of ambition, creativity, and inequality, leaving only whispers in the waves. And as we'll see next, the very forces that made this city rich may have also sealed its fate. But prosperity can be fragile, and nature often has the final say. the city's fate was sealed not by war or decay, but by a catastrophe that arrived with terrifying speed. So what exactly brought the waters crashing in? One leading theory points to a monstrous storm, the kind that rolls in off the sea with winds strong enough to flatten forests. Imagine towering waves battering the coastline for days, overwhelming the city's rudimentary dikes and flooding the streets. Contemporary chronicles describe a night when the sky turned black as pitch, with rain so heavy it seemed the heavens had split open. Fishermen's huts along the shore vanished overnight, swallowed by the churning sea. Then there's the possibility of a tsunami. Geological surveys reveal layers of sand and shell far inland, debris typically dragged ashore by a massive wave. Some scholars believe an underwater landslide or distant earthquake could have sent a wall of water racing toward the coast, giving little warning before it struck. Survivors' accounts speak of a strange retreat of the sea before the water surged back with unimaginable force, sweeping away entire neighborhoods in minutes. Others argue the disaster was man-made. The city's rapid expansion had strained its defenses, with marshes drained for farmland and natural barriers removed to make way for new docks. A neglected dam upstream may have collapsed under pressure, unleashing a torrent down the river valley. Recent excavations uncovered broken timbers and rubble piled in a way that suggests a sudden, violent rush of water from inland, not the sea. What's chilling is how these theories intertwine. A storm could have weakened the dam. A tsunami might have struck during already heavy rains. The truth may lie in a cruel combination: nature's fury amplified by human oversight. And as we'll see next, those who lived through it carried the horror of that night for generations. Now let's step into the voices of those who survived the unimaginable. Eyewitness accounts, though rare and often fragmented, offer a chilling glimpse into the flood's human toll. One sailor's journal, preserved in a monastery, describes how the water rose so fast that people climbed onto rooftops only to watch the streets below vanish into a swirling abyss. He writes of screams swallowed by the wind and of lanterns flickering out one by one as the darkness consumed the city. Oral histories passed down through generations add another layer to the tragedy. In nearby villages, elders still recount stories of refugees who arrived with nothing but the clothes on their backs, their faces hollow with shock. One tale speaks of a child found clinging to a wooden beam miles inland, too traumatized to speak for years. These personal echoes of survival contrast sharply with the sterile timelines of geological records, reminding us that behind every layer of sediment lies a story of terror and loss. But how do these harrowing memories hold up against modern science? Some details align eerily well. Survivors' descriptions of the water's sudden retreat before the surge match tsunami behavior, while their accounts of relentless rain support the storm theory. Yet other elements defy explanation. A few chronicles mention strange lights dancing over the waves that night, a detail scientists can't corroborate, though some speculate it could have been bioluminescent algae stirred up by the chaos. Then there are the gaps where science and stories diverge entirely. No survivor mentions a dam breaking, yet physical evidence suggests it played a role. Could the trauma have erased that detail, or did the collapse happen too far upstream for most to notice? The contradictions aren't flaws in the record, they're clues. Each discrepancy forces us to ask new questions, stitching together a fuller picture of that catastrophic night. And as we'll soon see, those final moments before the waves took everything were more desperate than we've ever imagined. Now let's piece together those final, desperate hours as the city fought for survival. The flood didn't just arrive, it hunted. At first, people noticed the distant roar, a sound like thunder that never faded. Then the riverbanks burst, water surged through streets with terrifying speed, turning squares into whirlpools and alleys into death traps. Families scrambled to upper floors, dragging children and elderly relatives, while others tried to flee toward higher ground, only to find escape routes already swallowed by the rising tide. The chaos was unimaginable. Merchants abandoned their stalls, leaving goods to float like debris. Livestock panicked, their cries adding to the screams of those trapped. Some climbed onto rooftops, praying the structures would hold, only to watch neighboring buildings collapse under the water's weight. A few resourceful souls lashed together makeshift rafts, but the currents were too strong, flipping them like toys. The lucky ones clung to debris, carried for miles before finding refuge. The unlucky vanished beneath the waves without a trace. As night fell, the horror deepened. Torches and lanterns flickered out, plunging the city into darkness broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. Survivors later spoke of the eerie silence that followed the initial chaos, just the relentless lapping of water against walls, the occasional distant shout, then nothing. By dawn, the city was gone. Where bustling markets and homes once stood, only rooftops and church spires broke the surface like gravestones marking a mass grave. This wasn't just destruction, it was erasure. The water didn't just kill, it buried secrets, silenced stories, and left behind questions we're still trying to answer centuries later. And as we'll soon discover, what the flood didn't take, the sea would preserve in ways no one could have predicted. But beneath those waves, time stood still. Centuries later, archaeologists diving into the murky depths made discoveries that would bring this lost city back to life. The first clues were fragments of everyday life, a rusted key still lodged in a door, a child's wooden toy half buried in silt, pottery shattered but unmistakably medieval. These weren't just relics, they were proof. Then came the structures, walls of homes, their stones still stacked as if waiting for residents to return. A blacksmith's forge, its anvil resting where it had fallen. Most haunting of all, the skeleton of a church, its altar intact beneath layers of sediment. Divers reported feeling the weight of history as they swam through doorways frozen in time, their flashlights revealing carvings on beams, names, dates, prayers scratched into wood by hands long gone. The real breakthrough, a merchant's chest, its lock corroded but contents preserved by the cold, oxygen-starved water. Inside, coins minted with the city's symbol, fabric samples from distant lands, and a ledger detailing trade's evidence this was a hub of commerce before the waves claimed it. Every artifact pulled from the depths tells the same story. This wasn't a legend, it was a living, breathing community, its existence now confirmed by the very flood that erased it. And as we'll see next, modern technology would reveal even more secrets hidden beneath the silt. But the story doesn't end with what divers could see with their own eyes. The true revolution in uncovering this lost city came from the tools of modern science. Advanced technology peeled back layers of time, revealing secrets the naked eye could never catch. Sonar became the first game changer. By sending sound waves through the water, researchers created detailed maps of the submerged ruins without disturbing a single grain of silt. These scans showed entire neighborhoods, streets, and even the outline of the city's marketplace structures invisible to divers swimming just meters above them. Then came LiDAR, a laser-based marvel typically used to map dense jungles. Mounted on boats, it pierced the murky water, measuring distances with pinpoint accuracy. The result, a three-dimensional blueprint of the city as it once stood, complete with collapsed walls and the faint imprint of long-vanished rooftops. But technology didn't stop at mapping. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROV, allowed archaeologists to explore deeper, riskier areas. Equipped with cameras and robotic arms, these underwater drones recovered artifacts from tight spaces like a jeweler's workshop tucked beneath a fallen beam, where human divers couldn't safely go. And perhaps most astonishing, sediment core sampling. By extracting tubes of mud from the seabed, scientists could read the flood's timeline like tree rings. Each layer held clues, ash from hearths, pollen from crops, even microscopic fish bones that revealed the season when the waters rushed in. Together, these tools did more than rediscover a city. They turned a legend into a living chapter of history, pixel by pixel, scan by scan. And as we'll see next, this wasn't just a local tragedy. It was part of a much larger pattern of medieval disasters that reshaped entire coastlines. Now let's step back and see how this tragedy fits into the bigger picture of medieval disasters. The flood that swallowed this city wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a terrifying pattern that reshaped coastlines and communities across Europe. Take St. Lucia's flood, for example. In the year 1287, a monstrous storm surge slammed into the Netherlands, killing tens of thousands and carving out what we now call the Zuiderzee. Entire villages vanished underwater, much like our lost city. But here's the key difference: where St. Lucia's flood left behind a sprawling inland sea, our city was buried so completely that even its name faded from memory. Then there's the Great Drowning of Men, a series of brutal floods that battered the coasts of England and Germany in the early 1300s. These weren't single catastrophic events, but wave after wave of storms that drowned farmland, salted the soil, and triggered famines. Unlike our city's sudden demise, the Great Drowning was a slow-motion disaster that unfolded over decades. What ties all these tragedies together? Climate change. The medieval warm period, a time of unusually mild weather, had given way to the Little Ice Age by the 1400s. Rising sea levels and violent storms became the new normal. Coastal cities that had thrived for generations suddenly found themselves on the front lines of nature's fury. But here's what makes our Sunken City unique. While other floods left survivors to rebuild or migrate, this disaster was so complete that the city itself became a time capsule preserved not just in stories, but in the very mud that swallowed it. And as we'll soon discover, that mud held clues that would spark theories far stranger than any storm. Now, let's turn to something even more haunting than the flood itself: the stories people told to make sense of the tragedy. In the medieval world, disasters like this weren't just natural events, they were messages from God. Many believed the flood was divine punishment, a reckoning for the city's sins. Imagine the terror in the aftermath. Survivors and those who heard the tales would have searched desperately for meaning. Preachers pointed to greed, corruption, or moral decay as the reason the waters rose. Chroniclers wrote of omens ignored, strange animal behavior, eerie lights in the sky, signs the city had failed to heed. These weren't just explanations, they were warnings to others. But here's where it gets fascinating. These stories did more than assign blame, they reshaped history. Accounts of the flood were often rewritten to fit moral lessons, exaggerating the city's flaws to justify its fate. A thriving trade hub might be recast as a den of vice in later retellings. Even the city's name, once proud, could become synonymous with divine wrath. Compare this to other medieval disasters. After the Black Death, some claim the plague was God's judgment, leading to violent scapegoating of minority groups. But with floods, the punishment felt more absolute: no survivors to persecute, just a drowned city as a stark reminder. What's chilling is how these narratives endured. Centuries later, fishermen swore they heard ghostly church bells beneath the waves, as if the city itself were still pleading for forgiveness. Whether people believed the stories or not, they became part of the landscape, a moral shadow over the water. Yet modern discoveries complicate this picture. Archaeology shows a city much like any other, not especially wicked, just unlucky. So why did the divine punishment theory stick? Perhaps because it's human nature to search for patterns, even in chaos. And as we'll see next, some patterns are written not in scripture, but in the very soil beneath our feet. Now let's dig deeper, literally, into the secrets hidden beneath the earth. While stories and legends offer one perspective, the soil itself holds a far more concrete record of what happened that fateful day. Scientists turn to sediment cores, long cylinders of earth drilled from the ground, to uncover the truth layer by layer. Picture this like reading a book, but instead of words, each page is a different stratum of soil. When the floodwaters rushed in, they carried sand, silt, and debris from the surrounding area, depositing them in thick, chaotic layers. These stand out sharply against the finer, slower-built sediments of calmer times. By analyzing the composition and thickness of these flood deposits, researchers can estimate not just when the disaster struck, but how powerful it was. One key clue lies in tiny particles, pollen, seeds, even microscopic shells trapped within the mud. These remnants tell us what the environment was like before and after the flood. A sudden shift from freshwater species to saltwater organisms, for example, confirms the invasion of the sea. Meanwhile, radiocarbon dating of organic material in the layers helps lock in the timeline, often narrowing the flood's date to within just a few decades. But the most startling revelations come from the sheer scale of the deposits. In some cores, the flood layer is several feet thick, suggesting water surged in with terrifying force, possibly as a wall of waves rather than a gradual rise. Other sites show multiple flood bands, hinting that the city might have suffered smaller inundations before the final, catastrophic blow. What's remarkable is how these silent layers of dirt challenge the old tales of divine wrath. The sediments don't speak of moral failings, they speak of natural forces, of a coastline vulnerable to storms or shifting tides. And as we'll see next, these forces didn't just erase a city, they preserved it in ways no one could have imagined. Now let's turn our attention to the treasures that time forgot, objects pulled from the watery depths that whisper stories of the city's vibrant past. While the flood erased lives and buildings, it also acted as an unlikely preservative, sealing countless artifacts in layers of mud and silt. These recovered items offer us a tangible connection to the people who once walked these streets. Among the most striking finds are delicate pieces of jewelry, rings, brooches, and pendants crafted with intricate designs. Some bear symbols of faith like crosses or saints, revealing the spiritual life of the community. Others showcase the skill of local artisans with patterns that mirror the artistic trends of the era. A particularly stunning discovery was a gold filigree necklace, its fine wirework suggesting the city had access to wealthy trade networks or skilled metalworkers. Coins, too, tell a compelling tale. Stamped with the faces of long-forgotten rulers, they help historians pinpoint the city's peak years and its economic ties. Some currencies came from distant lands, proving this was a hub of commerce where merchants bartered goods from across the known world. Even the wear on these coins speaks volumes. Heavily used pieces hint at bustling markets, while pristine ones might have been hoarded wealth lost in the panic of the flood. Then there are the everyday items that paint a picture of domestic life. Ceramic bowls still bearing soot from cooking fires, wooden combs, their teeth worn from years of use. A child's toy, perhaps dropped in the rush to escape. These ordinary objects are just as precious as the gold and silver because they remind us that this was a living, breathing community, one that laughed, worked, and loved before the waters rose. Perhaps the most haunting finds are the religious relics, small icons, fragments of altars, even a miraculously intact chalice. These suggest the city's last moments were marked not just by fear but by faith. Did priests clutch these items as they prayed for deliverance? Were they carried by fleeing families only to be swallowed by the waves? Each artifact is a puzzle piece, helping us reconstruct not just the city's material culture but its heart. And as we'll soon see, modern technology is giving us new ways to hear these whispers from the past even more clearly. But what about the city itself? How does a place so vibrant, so full of life, simply vanish from memory? The answer lies in the tangled web of history, politics, and the relentless passage of time. Names hold power. They anchor a place in history, tying it to maps, records, and the stories people pass down. Yet this city's name slipped through the cracks, disappearing from chronicles and fading from memory. One theory suggests that after the flood, survivors scattered to nearby towns, taking their stories with them but leaving no central community to keep the name alive. Without a living population to preserve its identity, the city became a ghost in the historical record. Political upheaval may have played a role too. Medieval kingdoms rose and fell, borders shifted, and new powers rewrote history to suit their own narratives. If the city lay in a contested region, its name might have been deliberately erased by rival rulers eager to claim the land as their own. Some scholars point to fragmented texts where the city's name appears only once, crossed out or replaced with a newer settlement's title, a small but telling clue to its deliberate erasure. Then there's the question of language. Over centuries, dialects evolved and place names morphed into unrecognizable forms. What locals once called their home might have sounded entirely different to later scribes, who recorded it incorrectly or dropped it altogether. Even today, researchers debate which of several possible names in ancient documents truly refers to this lost city. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the disaster itself made people turn away. Survivors, grieving and traumatized, may have avoided speaking of the place, letting its memory fade as a way to cope. Or later generations, hearing tales of the flood, might have seen the city as cursed, a place better forgotten than remembered. Yet despite all this, the city refuses to stay buried. Every artifact pulled from the mud, every fragment of a wall uncovered, is a defiant whisper against oblivion. And as we'll see next, those whispers have grown louder with the help of modern technology, bringing this lost world back into the light. But the story doesn't end with history books and crumbling artifacts. Over time, the tragedy of this lost city seeped into the realm of myth, giving rise to eerie tales that still haunt the coastline today. Fishermen whisper of hearing ghostly bells tolling beneath the waves on stormy nights, a mournful echo of the city's drowned churches. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving through the shallows, their shapes flickering like candlelight before vanishing into the depths. One particularly chilling legend tells of a phantom procession, a line of spectral figures carrying lanterns, retracing the final steps of those who tried and failed to escape the rising waters. These stories aren't just campfire scares, they reveal something deeper about how people cope with the unexplainable. When faced with a disaster of this scale, the human mind craves meaning. Was the flood divine punishment, as some medieval preachers claimed, or did the restless dead remain trapped between worlds? The myths blur the line between history and horror, offering a way to process the unimaginable. Even today, locals avoid sailing over the ruins at night, a superstition passed down through generations. Scientists might dismiss these tales as folklore, but they endure because they fill the gaps left by lost records. Every eerie rumor, every whispered warning, keeps the memory of the city alive in its own way. And as we'll soon see, modern explorers aren't just uncovering stones and pottery, they're also piecing together how this tragedy reshaped the survivors who carried its legacy forward. Now, let's step back and consider the bigger picture. What role did the climate itself play in this disaster? The Middle Ages were a time of dramatic weather shifts, and scientists now believe these changes may have set the stage for the flood that swallowed the city. Tree rings and ice cores tell us this period saw wild swings between droughts and deluges, with entire regions becoming more vulnerable to extreme weather. Some researchers point to the medieval warm period, a stretch of unusually high temperatures that melted glaciers and swelled rivers across Europe. Others argue it was the sudden return of colder conditions that triggered violent storms, pushing tides higher than ever before. What's striking is how familiar these patterns feel today. Modern climate data reveals similar warning signs: rising sea levels, stronger storms, and unpredictable rainfall, echoing the very conditions that may have doomed the medieval city. It's a sobering reminder that while technology has advanced, our struggle against nature's fury remains unchanged. Could history be repeating itself? Coastal cities now face the same threats from rising waters, and the lessons from this ancient tragedy couldn't be more urgent. The past isn't just a story, it's a blueprint for understanding our own vulnerabilities. And as we'll see next, some of those vulnerabilities might have been avoidable. Now, let's turn our attention to the city's defenses, or rather, the lack of them. Could this tragedy have been avoided with better engineering? The answer isn't simple, but the clues left behind paint a revealing picture. Unlike some medieval cities built on hills or behind sturdy walls, this one sat vulnerable on low-lying land, its fate tied to the whims of the water. Archaeologists have found no signs of seawalls or drainage systems that could have held back the flood. Instead, the city relied on natural barriers like sandbanks and dunes, a gamble that ultimately failed when the waters surged. Some historians argue that even basic measures, raised earthen mounds, sluice gates, or reinforced riverbanks might have bought precious time for escape. But others point out that medieval technology had limits. Without modern materials or hydraulic knowledge, could any defense have withstood such a catastrophic surge? What's haunting is how many of these vulnerabilities still exist today. From aging levees to overcrowded floodplains, history's warnings often go unheeded. The Lost City story forces us to ask, are we repeating the same mistakes just with taller walls? As we piece together these fragments of the past, another question lingers. Where did the survivors go after the waters receded? Their journey and the legacy they left behind might hold the key to understanding the full impact of this disaster. The waters may have receded, but the story was far from over. As survivors emerged from the wreckage, they faced an impossible choice: rebuild or leave. Many chose the latter, scattering across the region in search of safety. Their journeys weren't just about survival. They carried fragments of their lost home with them, weaving its legacy into new communities. Archaeologists have traced their footsteps through pottery shards, tools, and even dialects that suddenly appeared in neighboring towns. In one village, records show a sudden influx of skilled weavers, a craft the Sunken City was famous for. Elsewhere, burial sites reveal unique grave goods matching those found beneath the waves, silent markers of displaced families. Genetic studies add another layer to the puzzle. DNA from modern descendants in nearby regions shows distinct clusters linked to the flood's timeframe, suggesting entire kinship networks were uprooted. Some families even passed down oral histories of the Great Drowning, though the city's name faded with time. Perhaps the most poignant clue lies in folklore. Stories of strangers who brought the sea with them or taught forgotten songs echo through local traditions. These weren't just refugees, they were culture bearers, reshaping the identity of the places they settled. Yet their arrival wasn't always welcomed. Tax rolls and legal disputes hint at tensions over shared resources, a reminder that displacement rarely unfolds smoothly. Still, over generations, the survivors' influence endured in recipes, festivals, and even the layout of streets that mirrored their drowned home. As we follow these scattered threads, one truth becomes clear: the flood didn't just erase a city. It sent ripples through history, leaving traces that still whisper to us today. And with that, we turn to the voices that captured the disaster in real time, the medieval writers who tried to make sense of the unimaginable. As the dust settled and the waters calmed, the written word became a refuge for those grappling with the disaster. Medieval writers, from monks to poets, poured their shock and sorrow into ink, leaving behind a haunting record of the flood's impact. One chronicler described it as the day the heavens wept, his trembling script betraying the raw emotion behind the words. Sermons from the period reveal how clergy framed the tragedy, some as divine punishment, others as a test of faith. A bishop's surviving homily urges listeners to build not with stone but with virtue, suggesting the flood stripped away illusions of human permanence. Meanwhile, anonymous ballads sung in taverns turned the event into cautionary tales, warning against hubris with refrains like, "The sea remembers what men forget." Poets, too, wrestled with the scale of loss. A surviving fragment from a wandering troubadour laments, "Where bells once rang, now fish make their home," blending grief with eerie imagery. These works weren't just memorials, they were attempts to process collective trauma, transforming chaos into something graspable through metaphor and rhythm. Even dry administrative records betray emotion. A tax collector's note from a nearby town abruptly switches from tallies to a personal aside. God spare us another such night. This duality between official duty and human horror shows how deeply the disaster permeated daily life. What makes these accounts so powerful is their unfinished quality. Many are fragmented, as if the writers themselves were overwhelmed. Yet in their broken lines, we find the closest thing to hearing the city's last echoes. And as we'll soon see, those echoes weren't just preserved on parchment, they're etched into the very earth beneath our feet. But beneath the waves, something remarkable was happening. While the flood erased the city from the surface, the same waters that destroyed it became its unlikely protector. The key to this paradox lies in the unique conditions of its underwater grave. Cold, dark, and starved of oxygen, the depths where the city settled created a near-perfect time capsule. Without sunlight or warmth, the usual forces of decay, bacteria, insects, and weathering simply couldn't thrive. Wooden beams that would have rotted away in years on land remained intact for centuries. Leather shoes, fabric, even delicate carvings survived with startling detail, as if the flood had pressed pause on time itself. The lack of oxygen played an equally crucial role. In normal conditions, microorganisms break down organic materials rapidly. But here, in these still, suffocating waters, decay slowed to a crawl. Iron tools avoided rust, and wooden structures avoided the wormholes that plague sunken ships in warmer seas. Even food remnants, barrels of grain, fruit pits were found preserved, offering snapshots of the city's final meals. This eerie preservation extended to the city's layout itself. With minimal currents to disturb the debris, buildings collapsed inward rather than scattering. Archaeologists could trace walls along their original foundations, and pottery shards lay where they'd fallen from shelves. It's as though the flood didn't just bury the city, it sealed it in a watery vault, waiting for modern explorers to crack it open. And when they did, they uncovered more than artifacts. They found a moment frozen in disaster, where every object tells a story of sudden interruption. A loom with thread still taut, a child's toy mid-roll across a floor. These aren't just relics, they're echoes of ordinary lives, preserved not despite the flood but because of it. Yet this underwater time capsule raises new questions. If the city survived so well beneath the waves, what other secrets might still lie hidden in the world's drowned places? The answer, it seems, is waiting just beneath the surface. Now, let's wade into the murkier waters of myth and misinformation. Over the centuries, the story of this sunken city has attracted its fair share of tall tales and conspiracy theories. Some claim the flood was no natural disaster but divine punishment, pointing to medieval sermons that called it a cleansing wrath. Others whisper of cursed artifacts or ghostly echoes beneath the waves, claims that make for gripping folklore but crumble under scrutiny. Take the so-called phantom bells legend, for instance. Locals long swore they could hear church tolls ringing from the depths on stormy nights. Romantic as it sounds, scientists have a simpler explanation. The peculiar acoustics of the bay, where wind and waves hit submerged structures, can create eerie, bell-like reverberations. No spirits required. Then there's the persistent myth that the city was swallowed in a single monstrous wave, a medieval tsunami. While dramatic, geological evidence tells a different story. Sediment layers reveal a slower catastrophe, likely caused by relentless storms overwhelming fragile dikes. The truth is grim enough without embellishment, a community fighting rising waters for days before losing the battle. Perhaps the most outlandish claim is that the city's ruins are guarded by supernatural forces. Divers have reported equipment malfunctions or unexplained currents near the site, but marine experts chalk this up to the area's tricky underwater topography, where shifting sands and sudden drop-offs create natural hazards. The real danger isn't ghosts, it's overconfidence when exploring a fragile, centuries-old wreck. So why do these myths persist? Partly because mysteries invite speculation, but also because the flood's sheer scale feels almost unnatural to modern minds. It's easier to blame gods or curses than accept how vulnerable human settlements are to nature's whims. Yet the artifacts don't lie. They tell a story of ordinary people caught in an extraordinary disaster, one that needs no supernatural spin to captivate us. As we resurface from these murky theories, let's turn to a clearer question. How did the survivors reshape the world beyond the floodwaters? Their journey, marked by resilience and reinvention, might just hold the most compelling truth of all. Now let's bridge the gap between history and the present, because the story of this drowned city isn't just a relic of the past, it's a stark warning for our future. Today, countless coastal cities and low-lying communities face eerily similar threats from rising seas and intensifying storms. The medieval disaster we've been exploring wasn't a one-off tragedy. It was a preview of what happens when human settlements underestimate nature's power. Take modern-day Venice, for example. Like our lost medieval city, it battles frequent flooding, with its famous squares often submerged under acqua alta. Engineers scramble to deploy barriers, but the question remains, are we doing enough, or are we merely delaying the inevitable? Then there's Miami, where sunny day flooding is now routine, seawater bubbling up through drains even without storms. These aren't distant dystopias, they're unfolding realities. What's chilling is how history rhymes. Medieval societies lacked our technology, but they also made choices building on vulnerable land, ignoring environmental signs that magnified their risk. Sound familiar? Today, we have satellite forecasts and reinforced concrete, yet we continue to develop floodplains and coastlines as if the waters will politely stay put. The lesson here isn't just about better engineering, it's about humility. Climate change adds a terrifying twist. Warmer oceans fuel stronger storms, while melting glaciers push sea levels higher. Scientists warn that by the end of this century, cities from Bangkok to New Orleans could face medieval-scale inundations unless we act. But here's the crucial difference. Unlike our ancestors, we see the flood coming. The data is undeniable. The choice to heed or ignore these warnings rests with us. So what can we learn from a disaster centuries old? First, that resilience isn't just about walls or barriers. It's about adapting where and how we live. The Dutch, for instance, don't just build dikes, they design floating neighborhoods and water-absorbing parks, working with nature rather than against it. Second, that memory matters. The stories of past floods, like the one that buried our medieval city, remind us that survival isn't guaranteed. It's earned through foresight and respect for the forces around us. As we confront our own era of climate upheaval, let's not repeat the old mistakes. The ruins beneath the waves are more than a curiosity, they're a challenge. Will we be the generation that listened, or will we become the next cautionary tale? The water is rising. The time to decide is now. With that urgent question lingering, let's turn to the explorers and scientists who are still uncovering secrets from this sunken city. Their work doesn't just illuminate the past, it could help safeguard our future. Shifting our focus to the mysteries still waiting beneath the waves, the story of this lost city is far from over. Archaeologists and marine scientists are racing against time and tides to piece together the final chapters of its history. Cutting-edge technology is revealing structures we never knew existed, like submerged marketplaces or temples hidden under layers of silt. But every discovery sparks new questions. Who lived in these buildings? What treasures might still lie buried in the mud? One of the biggest puzzles is the city's exact layout. Sonar scans show fragmented walls and roads, but how did they connect? Was there a grand cathedral or palace at its heart? Upcoming expeditions plan to deploy underwater drones with high-resolution cameras, mapping the ruins inch by inch. These efforts could finally give us a complete picture of the city's design, showing us how its people moved through their world before the waters swallowed it whole. Then there's the mystery of the flood's timeline. Sediment cores tell us the disaster was sudden, but were there warning signs? Researchers are analyzing tree rings and soil layers from nearby areas, searching for clues like prolonged rains or smaller floods in the years before the catastrophe. If they find evidence of environmental stress, it could rewrite our understanding of how medieval societies responded, or failed to respond, to looming disasters. Personal stories also remain tantalizingly out of reach. While we've found tools and cookware, where are the diaries, the letters, the voices of those who survived? Preservation in water is tricky, but scientists are testing new techniques to recover fragile materials like parchment or wood. Imagine uncovering a merchant's ledger or a child's toy artifacts that would transform these ruins from abstract history into intimate human drama. Perhaps the most pressing question is what else the sea is hiding. Less than half the suspected city has been explored, and storms frequently shift the sands that blanket it. Each expedition risks missing something vital or uncovering it only to lose it again. That's why teams are now tagging artifacts with digital trackers, creating a real-time map of the site's changes. It's a race not just to discover, but to preserve. The work being done here doesn't just satisfy curiosity, it builds a playbook for saving vulnerable cities today. By studying how this medieval community coped or failed to cope, we gain insights into modern flood risks. Every broken wall and displaced stone has a lesson to teach. And as technology improves, who knows what secrets the next dive might reveal? The waves that took this city still guard its stories, but not for much longer. Turning from the scientific quest to the realm of imagination, the Lost City's tragedy has long been a muse for storytellers. Its dramatic downfall, a bustling community erased in moments, has inspired countless novels, each weaving tales of love, survival, or divine retribution against the backdrop of the flood. Historical fiction authors often imagine the final days through the eyes of invented characters, blending real archaeological finds with human drama to make the past feel alive. These stories resonate because they transform cold facts into emotional journeys, letting us walk the city's drowned streets alongside those who once called it home. Documentaries, too, have seized on the mystery, using CGI reconstructions to resurrect the city's skyline or animate the flood's terrifying advance. By pairing expert interviews with vivid visuals, they turn sediment layers and sonar scans into gripping narratives. The best of these films don't just inform, they immerse, making viewers feel the weight of history pressing in from all sides. It's no accident that the city's story often draws comparisons to Atlantis or Pompeii. Like those legends, it embodies nature's power to humble human ambition in an instant. Artists, meanwhile, have translated the city's fate into haunting paintings and sculptures. Some depict the flood itself, waves crashing over rooftops, desperate figures clinging to debris, while others focus on the eerie quiet of the ruins beneath the sea. These works capture the duality of the city's legacy, a place both violently lost and strangely preserved, its memory kept alive through creative reinterpretation. What makes this story endure across mediums? Perhaps it's the unanswered questions that leave room for speculation, or the universal fear of disaster striking without warning. Whatever the reason, the Lost City's grip on our imagination shows no sign of fading. Every retelling, whether in ink or on screen, adds another layer to its myth, ensuring that, even as the sea claims more of its physical remains, the city's spirit never truly sinks beneath the waves. Now, let's step into the future while revisiting the past. Imagine strapping on a virtual reality headset and suddenly finding yourself standing in the heart of the Lost City, its streets bustling with life just moments before the floodwaters rise. Thanks to cutting-edge technology, this isn't just a fantasy, it's a reality. Archaeologists and digital artists have teamed up to create breathtaking 3D models and immersive VR experiences that transport users back in time, letting them explore the city as it once was. These virtual reconstructions are more than just flashy tech, they're powerful tools for understanding history. By combining data from underwater excavations with historical records, experts have rebuilt the city's layout down to the smallest details. Walk through its market square, peek into workshops, or even climb the steps of its grandest church, all from the comfort of your living room. The level of accuracy is staggering, with every brick and beam placed based on real archaeological findings. What makes these experiences truly special is how they bridge the gap between past and present. Instead of staring at static artifacts in a museum, you can watch the city breathe around you, see merchants haggling, hear the clang of blacksmiths, even feel the tension in the air as storm clouds gather on the horizon. It's history you don't just learn about but live through, and the best part, these tools aren't just for academics. Schools are using them to make history lessons unforgettable, while curious explorers worldwide can download apps or visit virtual exhibits. Suddenly, a tragedy that happened centuries ago feels immediate and personal, reminding us that these weren't just ruins, they were homes, dreams, and lives. As technology advances, so does our connection to the past. With each pixel-perfect reconstruction, the lost city rises from the waves once more, not as a ghost, but as a vibrant world waiting to be rediscovered. And who knows, the next breakthrough might let us hear the voices of its people, or even rewrite what we thought we knew about their final days. The story isn't over yet. Now, as we bring this journey to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on the haunting tale of this medieval city swallowed by the waves, yet never truly forgotten. Its story is a stark reminder of nature's overwhelming power, capable of erasing centuries of human achievement in mere hours. But it's also a testament to resilience, how fragments of the past endure, whispering to us through artifacts, legends, and now even virtual reconstructions. The mysteries surrounding this lost city linger like the tides. Was its destruction a freak accident of weather or a warning etched into history? Why did some stories survive while others faded into obscurity? And what lessons does this tragedy hold for our modern world, where rising seas and extreme weather still threaten coastal communities? As we piece together its final moments, one question lingers: how fragile are we really in the face of nature's fury? This city's fate forces us to confront our own vulnerability, but also our ingenuity. After all, we're still searching for its secrets, still learning from its ruins, still ensuring its people are remembered. So what do you think? Could a disaster like this happen again? Or have we outsmarted the forces that once wiped entire cities off the map? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And if you found this dive into history as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an adventure into the past. Until next time, keep exploring, because every sunken city has a story waiting to surface.